Hi, and welcome to another installment in our VoltScript Venture series. Today we're covering a couple of examples related to receiving input into your code. First, we're going to take a quick look at ContextVSE. Then we'll look at working with standard in and out using StreamVSE. My name is Rocky Oliver, and I'm one of the lead geeks at HCL Labs working on the VoltScript scripting language. Let's get started by taking a look at ContextVSE. ContextVSE is a very simple extension containing only one class called context. And the context class has only one property, context. Context is simply used to retrieve a context string that is passed in when your code is executed. This is done by using the -- context parameter. So let's take a look at some code. As always, I've started in VS Code by setting up my Atlas JSON, setting up my what my name, version, description, all that, and the most important thing is added in my dependencies. Now I've gone ahead and added in dependencies for both context and stream because I'm going to be doing two examples today, one with context and one with stream. Uh, I did this by going to the help file, to references, VoltScript extensions, and then scrolling down and grabbing the dependency blocks from the list here. So I grabbed ContextVSE and I grabbed StreamVSE. I copied those over and I put them into my atlas.json. I'm also could get to the ContextVSE API doc by clicking on ContextVSE. And if I click on that, you can see it's an extremely simple extension. There's one class, context, and there's really one property that we care about, which is context.get. That's the only useful thing in here. So let's take a look at the code itself. So this is really simple code. You'll notice I've gone ahead and set up my options. I've got my use VSE loading in my context VSE, and I've set up a little sub with my example in it. You can see it's extremely simple. I created my context object, and the only thing I need to do is retrieve that context. I'm going to echo it back in a print statement. Now, how do I actually run this code? The way that you pass in the context is using the -- context parameter in the line when you actually execute the code. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this example right here. And then I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to paste it in. You can see initially it's going to say hello world. So if this is correct, it should echo back hello world. I hit enter and there we go. We got hello world. Now, if I were to come up here and change it, you can see there's nothing at my sleeve. I can come in and say hello worldly people. Okay? And now if I hit enter, you can see it echoed back hello worldly people. So that's all it is. It's really a simple way to dynamically pass in some type of context content to your code so that they execute on it. A lot of times this is used for such as passing in a path to a file that needs to be loaded or something like that. So now that we've taken a quick look at what ContextVSE is, let's jump into a more advanced example using StreamVSE. Now let's take a look at using a more creative example of using StreamVSE. In an earlier video, I showed you how you can use StreamVSE to work with files, reading the content of a file and writing content to a file. But you could also use StreamVSE to work with standard in and out. You could do this by setting the character set parameter of stream.open to one of the three standard input-output types, stdin for standard input, stdout for standard output, or stdio for both standard in and out. When you use one of these standards types, the file parameter is ignored. Not only can you use this to get input from your user, you can also use this to communicate with other pipes or processes. Now let's take a look at some code. Let's start by explaining the code before we actually run it. So I've gone ahead and added my use VSE with my stream VSE. So I get my stream VSE loaded so I can access it in the code. And then I wrote a sub for my example called write input to file. And in this, I've got two streams I'm using. One is called pipe stream. That's the one I'm going to be using for my standard in and out. And then I have file stream, which is the one I'm going to be using to actually take that standard in and out and write it to a file. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use that special character set tag that I told you about, stdio, to indicate to the stream class that this actual stream object is going to be used for in and output. Um, then I have the file stream, which is the one I'm going to actually use to write that to write that input to a file. So I set it up as an input.txt file, which you can see doesn't exist yet. And I'm going to be using just the standard UTF-8 character set. First thing I'm going to do though is once I do this, just in case that input.txt already exists, I'm going to call truncate, which as we learned before, will completely empty the contents of the file so I can rewrite it or overwrite it with new stuff. Then I've set up this little do while statement, and basically it's a loop that will continue until you tell it to stop. And the way that I indicate that it's going to stop is you can either type in quit or Q. And if you do, it'll say continue to false and jump out of the loop. Otherwise, it's going to, if you didn't put anything in, if you just hit an empty string, it's going to tell you I didn't hear anything, and it'll add that to the text file. Otherwise, it's going to take whatever you entered, it's going to echo it back with you entered, and it's going to tell you what you entered, and then it's going to write that same line to the input.txt file using my file stream object. Once we're done with our loop, I'm going to close both streams to get them out of memory, and for the file stream object, it actually will cause it to commit the file and write it to disk. So let's take a look at what this looks like when it runs. So I'm going to hit Control F5, and I'm going to hit Enter. And now I'm going to start typing this up. Here's a line. Here's another line. And here's a third line. And now I'm going to type Q to quit it. So we can see that I entered like 3 lines and then I quit. And if we look over here, we can see that our input.txt file was created. Let's take a look at what's inside of it. Oh, look here. Here's a line, here's another line, and here's a third line. Notice they're each on separate lines because in my code, I told it to write it with an EOL line feed. So it entered it each time, or with a platform end of line. So since I'm on Windows, it's a CRLF, but I could set it to LF or whatever. On the pipe stream, I just use line feed because all I care about is just making it look good in the output to the screen. And so as you can see, this is a very simple technique for getting input from your user and writing it to a file. It also shows how you can use multiple streams to work with various um, assets, such as standard in and out or a file, and kind of pipe them together using the read text and write text in combination. One other thing I want to point out is notice that for read text, that's how I get the input that's put in by the user when I'm prompting them for the information. Write text simply writes it back to the standard output. So it doesn't actually update the file. That's why you'll notice that I have the read text writing to the data variable, and that's the one I'm using to actually write my file stream object. The write text is just a way to echo back any information you want to the end user. So that's why, like, you didn't see in the output or in the input text, you didn't see you've entered blah, 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 because that was written to the console using write text. It was not actually written to the file stream file. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of how you can get input into your code using both ContextVSE and StreamVSE using standard in and out. Next time, we'll cover some more interesting things in VoltScript Ventures. Thanks for watching.